Let's start with the practical bit of our session today, which means that now we all will solve some questions in the exact CLAT pattern that you will be solving on your examination day. This is very important, students. So if you want to do good in your examinations, just knowing the concept, solving mocks with seeing the answers and not giving it without complete preparation is not the answer. You have to be prepared with the legal concepts, you have to be prepared with your understanding, and then you have to give yourself the same time frame, that is 2 hours. You have to give the same amount of questions in front of you, and you have to do it in the exact environment that a CLAT exam is posed before you. So now we will be dealing with questions pertaining to only IPR today, since we have done that topic, and similarly in the upcoming classes also we'll be dealing with questions relating to that specific topic. So right now we'll prepare you for this topic so that you do not make any mistakes in IPR. Moving on, our first passage is this. I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes of time, or even 5 minutes of time. Pause the video, listen to, recall what are the concepts that you have read. After reading the passage in detail, take some time to absorb it. Over time, I would recommend you that you go on a little faster and increase your time and efficiency simultaneously. Now take some time to read the passage, and then we'll be moving on to some questions and answers. Now also keep in mind that you have to understand the central theme of the questions. So do that as well, and then let me know when you are done, and then we can begin with the questions and answers. Now that you have read the passage, do you know what the central theme of it is? Yes, you're right. It deals with geographical indications at large. So geographical indications, I'll repeat the concept again for your clarity. It's a unique category of IPR that identifies a good as originating from a particular place. It is connected with a region, a source that has to be geographical in nature, hence the name geographical indication tag. Now it's essentially attributable to its geographical origin. For example, Darjeeling tea, Banarasi sari, and Mysore silk. These are 3 examples of GI tags. It is recognized under GI laws in India. Unlike trademarks, which can be owned by individuals or companies, GIs are typically owned by associations of producers or communities or regional bodies. Now this passage is a very standard passage. It's an easier passage that I've given you. The first passage talks about the legal rights, the IPRs, and the general concept of IPRs. Then it moves down to what is GI tag, and what are some examples, and what is the difference between trademark and GI. And later on it talks about what? It talks about an international framework, which is the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights under the World Trade Organization. When we're talking about this, a certain idea about international organization is given to you. So it's a watered down concept or the question standard passage that you can get in your CLAT paper. Now that you've gotten the gist of this passage, we can move to the question part of it. Question number 1. What is the primary distinction between a trademark and a geographical indication as per the passage? You've read the passage, right? If you are not clear, you can go back to the passage and refer to the answer. It's very easy. I'm sure you'll be able to do it because everything is spotted in the passage itself. Now, one more tip for your CLAT paper is you should read the passage very carefully. Do not take a lot of time, but do not just overlook a few points. You should go into a little detail because it will save time for you when you're answering your questions. Now, some people go ahead with that approach. Another approach is you give a quick reference to the passage, and when you are going through the questions, then you dive deeper into the details of it. See what suits you, and only then you can opt for your approach and make sure that your time is decreased and your efficiency is increased. When we're talking about this, what do you think is the correct answer? Let me move to the previous slide so that you can understand what the correct answer is. You can first read the options. Number A, trademarks are not protected under international law while GIs are. Is it the primary distinction? Number B, trademarks are limited to food items while GI covers all goods. C, trademarks can be owned by individuals or firms whereas GIs are linked to a region and usually owned by groups. Or D, trademarks expire after 10 years while GIs are permanent. By now I'm sure you know what the correct answer is, because here in this part you can see the difference. Yes, trademarks can be owned by individual companies, GI are owned by associations of producers, and also what is it's attributable to a geographical origin, but trademark is not. Hence the correct answer is number C. That trademarks can be owned by individuals or firms whereas GIs are linked to a region. When you're talking, even if you're not sure about the first bit of any answer, you can always refer to the second bit, and you have to think about the concepts that you've been taught about in depth. You can recall, or you can go by process of elimination. In questions that you are not very sure about, if you eliminate the wrong answers, it will automatically lead to the correct one. The first one, the trademarks are not protected under international law while GIs are, which is absolutely incorrect. Trademarks are limited to food items only while GIs cover all goods. That's not correct. Trademarks expire after 10 years while GIs are permanent. That's also not correct. Now, moving on to the second question. Based on the passage, which of the following is a consequence on the unauthorized use of a GI? So it means, what is, if you use a GI without any authorization, what is the natural consequence of it? Does it strengthen the traditional knowledge system, or does it promote economic loss and cultural misrepresentation, encouragement of competition, or legalization of parallel trade channels? Now, read the question very carefully here. When you're dealing with a consequence of an unauthorized use, it means that there has been an infringement, that without the consent it has been used. And in GI, you cannot do that. But if the question says what happens as a consequence, it is naturally a negative statement, right? It does not promote cultural heritage, obviously. It does not strengthen traditional knowledge or legalizes parallel trade channels or encourages competition. Not at all. What it does is economic loss and cultural misrepresentation takes place. So naturally, this is the correct answer. Moving on to the third question. Which of the following best captures the purpose of IPR as per the passage? You can read the questions. I'll give you a minute's time. You can try to decipher what the answer is. Then I'll tell you the correct answer, of course. Now, you need to understand the question. Which of the following best captures the purpose of IPR? In the first slide or the second slide itself, I've told you what is the purpose of IPR. Do you remember? If you remember, you would know that the option C is the correct answer because it enables the creators to benefit from their work and restrict misuse. Nobody else can misuse any product that is copyrighted, trademarked, or any protected under any IPR without their consent. And also creators, the people who have come up with that IPR, intellectual property, those creators benefit from their work economically, in a societal setting, in a very different sense altogether. But they are the ones who benefit from their work and restrict misuse. If we talk about the elimination process, the first to allow countries to trade exclusive goods across borders, it's not the purpose of IPR essentially. Some options might seem correct to you, but please do not be fooled by it, because here we are talking about the primary purpose of IPR, correct? To protect the revenue of multinational corporations or to ban counterfeit products. These are not the purposes of IPR. It might be included in different areas of IPR or the objectives or anything, but purpose essentially is to enable creators and to restrict misuse. Next question when we deal with, the last question for this passage is, according to the passage, what role does the TRIPS agreement play in relation to the GI? I will go back to the question. There you can, to the passage, and then you can refer what the correct answer is. Now you know, as you have read the passage, you know the TRIPS, all the passage deals with TRIPS agreement in the third paragraph. So you can actually find the answer there. Yes, you are correct. The answer is, it makes it mandatory for the member countries to provide legal means for GI protection. Yes. So according to the passage, what role does the TRIPS agreement play in relation to the GI? It makes it mandatory for member countries to provide legal means for GI protection. You can also find it in this passage. Here. It's in the second line itself. Sometimes the answer will be right in front of your face. Do not make such mistakes as to overlook them or avoid them. It's as simple as just spotting the answer. Sometimes you will need to apply a little bit more of your intellect while solving some hypothetical questions, which we'll see in the next question. When you're talking about copyright, we have known the concepts now. Now we'll be moving on to the practical question. So your second passage is here. You can pause your screens for 2 minutes and give it a read. Try reading it a bit faster than you did the last passage. Now you must have known what the central theme of the passage is. Obviously it relates to copyright. It is a form of intellectual property that grants, the definition is given here. Then you know what infringement is. You have been given a specific example in this case. You also deal with deeper copyright infringement issue in this, and some doctrines, the doctrine of fair use. Now always remember, the concepts in your questions might not be introduced to you in your teaching, or it must be a little foreign to you, right? You should, in those cases, you should read those lines a little bit more carefully, because there are always chances something new will be introduced in the passage. You cannot cover everything under the sky or everything under a certain act for your CLAT examination. It's not possible. So don't take stress. There are certain tactics for answering such questions. You just need to look deeper into the passage. So here, you must have gotten a central theme about what the passage is. In relation to that, in sync with that, let's move ahead with the questions specifically. Now that you've read the passage, let's move on to the questions. According to the passage, which one of the following would not be protected under copyright law? Such twisted questions also can come into place. For example, a poem describing a thunderstorm in vivid language. Let's go option by option. Let's do it slowly so that you can get a better understanding. Do you think a poem that is not just an idea, it has been expressed specifically in vivid language? That means it has been penned down very vividly, very clearly. Is it protected under copyright? Yes, it is. A novel narrating a time travel adventure with a unique characters. It has unique characters. It is a novel narrating. So obviously it is in some form, right? You can read it. It's a book. It's not just an idea. So this is also can be protected under copyright. The third one, abstract idea of a utopian society without the government. Or the fourth one, a painting inspired by artist dreams. What can you tell me? Obviously number D, option D can also be protected because it's painting, and copyright protects both literary, cinematographic, it protects dramatic, musical, all kinds of and computer software programs. But it does not protect an abstract idea. It's just an idea. It's a mere idea of a utopian society without government. You can dream anything. You can think about anything. We think about a warless world, right? A world without poverty. You come up with ideas that might be unique to you in your head, in your mind, that can solve poverty, that can solve global warming. But it's just in your head. You can come up with a movie script all on your own. But it's just in your head, and it's not a copyrighted work unless you express it in a very real form. So that's why the abstract idea of a utopian society without government is the correct answer here. It cannot be protected under copyright. The second question, a writer publishes a novel about a secret school for magical children. A second author writes a similar novel with different characters, plot and setting, but based on the same core idea. What does the passage suggest about whether this constitutes infringement? Understand the hypothetical question very carefully. Such hypothetical questions, till now I have been giving you very direct questions from the passage. But this is somewhere you have to apply a little bit more mind to it so that you get the correct answer. It's nothing too difficult. You just have to apply the concepts you know to this scenario. So here a writer is publishing a novel about a secret school. So first what we can determine is it is a copyrighted work because a person is publishing a novel about a secret school. But there, a second author writes a similar novel with different character plots and plot and setting, but based on the same core idea. What does the passage suggest about whether this constitutes infringement? There are two people here who are coming up with a similar idea. Similar novels, but different characters, plot and setting. Even though there's some similarity, there are some differences as well in the works of these both authors. But based on the same core idea, the core idea is the same. So, will it be infringement or not? What do you think is the correct answer? Here, the correct answer will be number B. Can you tell me why? I'll tell you. See, because the ideas are not protected, only the unique expression is protected. And what did I tell you while reading the question? I told you that even though the core idea is same, but there are certain differences. And the differences, it is not important that it is in the idea. It is important that the differences lies in the expression. And here the expression are different characters, right? Different characters, different plot and different setting. So it's very apparent. This question is very easy but put in a very tricky way. These questions are to be expected while giving your CLAT 2026 papers, but you can easily ace it with a little bit more preparation. Third question, which of the following is not a determining factor for courts when analyzing fair use as per the passage? Is not a determining factor. Now let's go back to the concept of fair use. What is fair use? Fair use allows limited use of copyrighted material without permission, particularly for criticism, research and commentary and education. For example, if I am using some work that has been published in a research paper, for example, that is also copyrighted work, right? But I am using it for teaching you guys, for my own work, but I am citing it for a purpose of education or research. These things I will not have to be said to infringe their copyright per se. But it will be something that comes under the definition of fair use. I'm fairly using it. I'm not using it for any commercial benefit. I'm not using it for unjust or unfair means. I'm using it for something that comes under this definition or doctrine. So you know about this concept through the passage. Now what do you think does not come under it? The purpose of use, what is not a determining factor? Purpose of use, obviously purpose of use is important. The emotional impact, is it important? No. So the correct answer we are getting here, but let's, for sake of your clarity, go through the different other options as well. Number C, the amount and substantiality of the portion used. Of course, it's very important. If you're using the complete, copyrighted work or not, how much are you using? That also is considered. And the effect of the use on the market value. I told you, the commercialization of the product. If I'm not using it for any commercialization, then it comes under fair use, provided it also is in compliance with the different fields I'm using it for. So here the obvious answer is the emotional impact on the original author. Now question number 4. Based on the passage, which of the following scenarios could still lead to copyright infringement? Did you understand the question? Try to read it again. It means that following scenarios, there are different scenarios that are given in the answer, and it could still lead to copyright infringement. The correct answer here is C. An artist unknowingly recreates a scene. Even though, the question means even though they did not want to, it can still lead to something that is infringing a copyright. It recreates a scene similar to a famous painting they saw years ago. It might not be obvious that's a copyright infringement, but it still will be. You might not know that you are infringing someone's copyright when you go with a movie script to a director. You might not have seen that movie, you might not have heard about it, you've not recognized the writing, but it might be similar. It's very similar. You're still infringing someone's copyright. Similarly, here also it's the same. Try and see. I'm interested to know if you can apply the question to different options here and tell me why the other options are wrong. Okay, moving on to question number 5. What does this passage imply about challenge of a copyright in a digital age? The third paragraph in this passage deals about the complications when it comes about copyright and the digital age. I told you digital rights is something very important when you're dealing with IPR for these few years in the CLAT question paper perspective. Because digital rights have been in the news, have been in the forefront for a while now, it's only developing more. With ChatGPT, with Claude, with different AI tools and different technologies that are coming up every day. Every day you see there a different AI tool. That is why copyright is very important, and such questions are to be expected. Don't be surprised. In sync with that, let's solve this question. What does the passage imply about challenge of copyright in the digital age? Let's move for this. For certain questions like this, you need to go back to the passage again and make sure you're ticking on the correct answer, because there might be more than one correct answers, but it specifically refers to what is given in the passage. So go back to the passage and see what it talks about. Look at the last paragraph. Here you can see courts are now faced with determining authorship and originality in the novel context. And also resulting from that, we have our answer. This landscape has led to debates about whether traditional copyright frameworks can adapt to the digital age. Now here we have our answer very clearly. The answer is option B. Now we've dealt with two passages relating to copyright and general IPR. What we'll talk, and also GI, right? Now we'll talk about a different IPR is trademark. So you need to solve questions about all different kinds of IPR so that you have a collective information and idea about how to solve these particular questions. Now I'll give you 3 minutes of time to pause the video and to read the passage very carefully. Did you all get the idea about what is this passage talking about? What is the central theme? Did you connect the dots here? Let me tell you. First, the trademark, it talks about what is the general definition and the use. Then, it deals with the registration and infringement, and also recognizes a different concept called as passing off. We didn't talk about passing off, but do you know what is it? If not, you can refer to the passage here. It protects the goodwill of a business even without registration. Do you remember I told you while teaching the concepts that even if you're not registered, you will still get certain level of protection. But registration is always preferred. But even if you don't, it doesn't mean that you do not have any protection under law. When it comes to trademark, you always have the right against passing off. And then it talks about the digital age and the new threats that trademarks are now suffering. Digital rights are not only limited to copyrights. It can always affect other IPRs as well. So this is how our passage goes about. Now, first question when we talk about, read with me, according to passage, which of the following would most likely to be denied registration under Trademarks Act? Certain words and the certain catchphrases, be careful, because that can alter your response altogether, right? Denied or grant. For example, you've been reading the whole passage and such a twisted question comes that it will be denied, not just granted. Then what will you do? If you read the opposite word of that, just because you're in the flow of the passage, then you will get one question wrong. So which of the following would mostly like to be denied registration under a trademark act? Is it a coined word? Is it a phrase that is already registered? Or is it a brand name that is inherently distinctive and unique? Or a stylized logo representing an invented term? What do you think will not get registration? Obviously, the answer is a phrase that is already registered. Because if a word or a symbol or anything that has been already registered under Trademarks Act, it cannot be given another registration from to another individual, right? Or another entity, because that already is registered. So you cannot register it again under a different name, or you cannot come up with the same product and register it. It will constitute infringement. Question number 2. What is the doctrine of passing of protect according to the passage? Whenever it talks about according to the passage, you refer to the passage so that you don't make a mistake. What is the doctrine of passing of protect? The correct answer is unregistered trademarks and business goodwill, because the other thing, registered trademarks are protected under registration of trademark. The descriptive marks in advertisement are protected, they are registered, and the unauthorized use of trade secrets, it's completely different, it's not relevant to the question. So what doctrine of passing of protects is if there are certain trademarks that have been unregistered, because registered trademarks, they are a different category, but unregistered trademarks are obviously protected by the specific doctrine. Question number 3. Which of the following is not essential to prove in a passing of action? Is it misrepresentation by the defendant, or registration certificate, or the damage or likelihood of damage, or existence of a reputation of goodwill? We have talked about a very essential concepts of trademark, right? That it is misrepresented by another individual. That's a likelihood of confusion. There is also damage or likelihood of damage, correct, to the person who actually owns that trademark. And there's an existence of reputation or goodwill that has been damaged. So here the obvious answer is registration certificate of the trademark is not important, because again, when you are linking the concept with the passage, you will know that your passing off is a certain doctrine which also protects unregistered trademarks. So this is not an essential criteria. Okay, moving on. Question 4. Based on the passage, what is the primary reason trademarks are protected under law? Is it to encourage competitive pricing, or to allow monopolization, or to prevent consumer confusion and protects business? Wait a second. We have seen a keyword. I have taught you this very often, and I've repeated it multiple times, that the element of confusion is very important when you come to trademark infringement. So here, prevention of consumer confusion is essential. Hence, your answer is right here, to prevent consumer confusion. And question number 5, what legal concern arises in cyber squatting as mentioned in the passage? Again, a new and a difficult term for you. You can read more about it if you're interested through, and I'm sure some of you already know what it is. But if such questions or terms are given in your CLAT paper, the explanation will be given to you in the passage. So do not worry. Just tell me what the answer is after referring to the passage. What is the specific legal concern? Let's go back to the passage and see. See, cyber squatting, where a party registers a domain name identical or similar to a well-known trademark in bad faith Courts have increasingly recognized that online misrepresentation can cause the same harm as physical counterfeiting, and remedies have evolved accordingly. So here, your answer is registering domain names in which are similar to existing trademarks in bad faith. It was a very simple answer. You just had to refer to the passage. The last passage for the day is relating to patent law, the last concept I told you about. So do you remember the concepts clearly? Let's test that. First, let's read the passage, of course. This is something that is an aid to you, a tool to you. I'm repeating again and again that the passage is the key for all of your answers, especially in subject like legal reasoning when it comes to CLAT. Now, pause your video for 2 minutes again and try reading it a little bit faster, because I know by now you are strong in your concepts relating to IPR. I hope you caught the gist of the passage. What does this passage talk about? Let's look into it. First, it talks about what is patent and what does it provide. Here, it's a time-limited monopoly on the inventions. It gives the inventions, the creators of those inventions, an exclusive and a monopoly right over their own products. It also talks about the specific act, the Patents Act. Which year was it enacted in? You're right, 1970. Now, the act deals with specific exclusions. I told you, right? You should look into a specific section. You should go through the Patents Act and you should tell me what is the specific section that deals with the non-patentable products. That's right. It is in section 3. Non-patentable subject matter includes discoveries that you just come upon. For example, if you just find something unique and non-obvious, it does not mean that you can, file for a patent, because you did not come up with it. It was not your creation, and IPR essentially deals with creation. So it is non-patentable. The natural substances that is already existing, like methods of treatment, it's non-patentable again. Then a mere admixtures. So here, this section deals with such matters. So here more information is given about that. And then what does Indian law talk about patents and the compulsory license, which is given under a different section, which is section 84. Don't be scared with those sections. You don't need to know about them in detail. You just need to read the passages and apply your common sense for the answers. And then the conclusion is given. It talks about enhanced efficacy and affordable pricing when it comes to it. And also one more very important term when you're reading this passage is your therapeutic efficacy. Do you remember this term? I had also mentioned it when we were talking about patents. If you don't remember, you can go back and you can pause the video there and you can absorb what all I had talked about when we were discussing patents in detail. Moving on with the questions, the first question deals with Dr. Raj invents a painkiller compound, Pain-X, and is granted a patent in 2010. In 2022, he creates a new crystalline form of Pain-X that is easier to store and dissolves faster in the body but shows no increase in the therapeutic effect. Just now I mentioned that the therapeutic effect or the efficacy is an important point when it comes to patents, specifically in the pharmaceutical domain. So there was no increase in that. He files for a patent application for the new form. He's already gotten the patent for the previous one. But for the new form, he's filed a patent application. What do you think? Should the patent be granted? No, right? That's an obvious answer. Because verbatim, which means as obvious as it can be seen in the passage, it is not increasing any therapeutic effect. So, because improved storage and solubility do not equate to enhanced therapeutic efficacy, this is the correct answer for it not being patentable, because it does not fill the criteria. Question number 2. A company named Biozen holds a patent on a life-saving drug for a rare disease. Right? Rare disease. The drug is priced at rupees 1.2 lakh per dose, making it unaffordable for most patients in India. It is also not being manufactured or imported into India due to a low commercial interest. A local company seeks compulsory license to produce a cheaper generic version. What is the difference between these two when you're talking about hypothetical question? In question number 2, the first company produced the product at rupees 1.2 lakh per dose, and the second company is producing it at a much cheaper rate for the purpose of making it more available and affordable in the society. What is the most legally sound outcome based on the passage? So here, when we're talking about a cheaper generic version and a compulsory license, this is a very important legal terminology. So what you can do is, in these cases, do not waste your time by being confused and trying to recall. If it is mentioned in the passage, go back to the passage and refer to what does it mean. And you might just find your answer. Now, where is compulsory licensing given in this passage? You guessed it right, it's in the third paragraph. Indian law allows for compulsory licensing under 84, especially if a patented invention is not available to a public at a reasonably affordable price. So such questions which are not direct, but still the answers are very easy to imply and refer to, and hence apply to the hypothetical situation given to you in the following questions, you will be able to find and you will be able to answer. So since it has been given that it is granted to certain products which are made affordable in the society, the answer for this will be the license should be granted because the drug is not available at an affordable price and not worked in India. Correct? It was not affordable before, but now a different company wants to make it affordable, the license will be granted under compulsory licensing. Now, some students might just see that the license should be granted and here also the license should be granted. And then they will not read the second part of the answer. Please do not make this mistake. Here the second one is not correct because if Biogen has violated patent laws, this is in no way relevant to our question here or to the passage also. So please apply your minds and then tick on the correct answer. The fourth question here, another hypothetical scenario. A startup develops an AI tool that assists in identifying molecular combinations for the drug development. The AI autonomously generates a new combination that is patented under the name of company's CEO, who supervised the research. A rival company challenges the patent, arguing that AI-generated inventions have no human inventor. Based on this passage's logic, what is a key legal issue? It's not always important. You will get questions like whether it's infringement or not, whether a patent will be granted or not. Such questions, that is why this is an important question here. What is a legal issue? For this very reason, you need to understand what is the central theme of each paragraph and the passage as a whole. If you do that, you will get to know that the answer is whether Indian patent law recognizes non-human inventorship. The recognition of non-human inventorship is in question here very clearly. In the first, if you read the first two lines carefully, you will get to know this is the obvious answer. Because it cannot be whether molecular drugs are patentable. That is not the logic that we go by. Any other question could have been given in this place, but that certain term is not what we want in the answer. We want what is the logic, what is the concept, what is the main issue. The main issue is the non-human inventorship. It's not whether a CEO can assign patents to themselves or not. That is not what is being asked. So answer only that what is being asked of you. Whether AI tools can be used for scientific discovery or not. We are not dealing with that right now. That might be a very valid question, but in this question, the answer is not that. So learn how to answer your questions very specifically for what is asked, and only then you'll be able to score the mark. The last question of the day is, Company X modifies an existing cancer drug to include a time release mechanism. There's a different mechanism that has been modified by Company X. allowing the medicine to be taken once a day instead of 3 times. Clinical data shows no increase in therapeutic effect. Again, there is no increase in therapeutic effect. Only increased convenience and compliance. They apply for a new patent based on the logic of Novartis case. Do you remember what the Novartis case is? If not, you can go back to the video and refer what I explained about. Novartis case, whenever you're reading any patent related cases or hypothetical questions, there's a very good chance they'll refer Novartis case. Based on the logic of Novartis case and section 3D, what is the likely result? Again, the answer is very clear from the get-go that the patent will be denied as increased compliance does not equal enhanced efficacy. It was right there in the passage and my explanation that therapeutic efficacy or the enhanced efficacy has to be present when you're dealing with an invention, specifically in the pharmaceutical domain. So when it was not present as is shown in the question, it will not be granted. So here these two are obviously not the answers, A and C, and number D, the patent will be denied because it is already patented in another country is not something that we are dealing with right now. It's not the question in hand. The question is whether even if it has enhanced compliance and enhanced convenience, do you think the patent will be granted? So keeping the facts in mind, the answer will be answer B. Let's move on with our next question, which is in relation to copyright law and AI generated works. As you know, AI generated works are coming into the picture more and more nowadays. So let's deal with the question in regard to that. So I'll give you a moment to pause to read the paragraph carefully and then we'll move on with the question. Now that you have read the question, read the passage properly, let's read the question together. Suppose an AI tool generates a painting. After a user gives a prompt, what is the prompt? A woman standing alone in a flooded city holding a red umbrella. This is the prompt that is given to the AI AI tool like ChatGPT or any other AI tool you might come across or you might use. So this was the prompt given, and the AI uses machine learning data from thousands of human artworks. So what the AI is doing is it is learning its data also from human artworks. It's not generating anything on its own, but at the same time it's not a human invention, right? Or a human creativity. It's merely copying. Now the user applies for copyright in India. Now, for example, you have you have been given an assignment. You come across an AI tool which will prepare the whole assignment for you. You do it and then you claim copyright over it. Will it be considered your creation, your intellectual property? No, it won't, right? So in light of that, what do you think is the correct answer? What is the most probable legal outcome under current Indian law? Now, when you're looking at this specific question, you have to look at it from this point of view that the legal scenario in India right now may or may not cover AI. That is for you to find out as a homework. So if it's not inclusive of AI tools, what is the most probable or the possible legal outcome? Keeping in mind all that you've done in the previous class. The correct answer would be option number B. Copyright is denied because the work lacks human authorship. Like I said, I gave you a hint while reading the question itself. The work does not include any human authorship. It derives the AI tool copies from every human artwork or multiple human artwork, but it does not create anything. Plus, AI itself is not a human being. So that is why even if it's unique, anything, it does not matter. The mere explanation is that AI is not a human being. Thus, its creation, invention, nothing will be recognized. So that is why our correct option is option B. Moving on to the second question, which is in relation to AI and copyright itself. A student copies a highly structured economic report, changes the phrasing but retains the structure. So what the student has done is he's copied the work from an AI tool, similarly like in the previous question, but he has retained the structure. But while changing the phrasing. So, for example, if you've copied something from somewhere, you use some AI tool to change the, you change the phrasing of it. In the same sentence, you flip it. The last part of the sentence, somehow you paraphrase it and then you bring it to the front of the sentence. But the structure remains the same of the whole copying that you've done. Now, examples and the flow of argument, even these were same. Structure was same, examples used were same, and the flow of the argument was also the same. The only thing that was changed was the phrasing. Keeping this in mind, the original author sues for infringement. Do you think this will amount to a copyright infringement? You have to consider three things here. First, that this was copied, right? A highly structured economic report. And then, what are the three things that have been changed? Three things that have been retained. It's the structure, the examples, and the flow of the argument. Now, obvious answer is option C, which is substantial similarity in expression amounts to infringement. Do you remember when I taught you copyright? I told you that the idea is protected, it's not protected. In fact, the expression is protected. Even if you have something in your mind, it does not mean that it will be copyrighted. It can be copyrighted, it cannot. That is a misunderstanding among many students. But when you see an example like this, when you see a question like this, and you say that, ma'am, even though they have copied the report, there's a paraphrasing. So there might be some difference. No. Here the main matter is most of the report, the structure, the important bits were the same. So there can be any confusion among students or any other person, a stranger, a layman, that the whole report is the same but has been copied. There is nothing unique to it. That is why substantial similarity exists and this expression will be an infringement of the copyright. Moving on to the next question that we have. Now, these two were most important questions in relation to AI and copyright. We'll move on to a second question relating to trademark law, which in regard to well-known marks and dilution. I've told you about well-known marks, and dilution is also something you will read about in this passage. There are many different concepts that you might come across in the form of questions, which might not have been taught to you, but don't be scared. Read the passage properly and then you'll be able to answer those. Let's put emphasis on this passage. Dilution occurs via blurring. What is blurring? Blurring means weakening distinctiveness, which means that you are not completely, vanishing the distinctiveness or the unique nature of a product or the unique tagline or the unique mark of a product, but you are weakening it to a significant amount. That is called dilution through blurring. And then there is another kind of dilution, which is through tarnishment. Now, tarnishment means that you are harming a product's or a brand's, goodwill or reputation, which means that, for example, our favorite example of Nike shoes, if you go about saying that Nike shoes is really, the soles of the shoes are really bad. They go waste in around 1 month or so, even though it's a lie. That means you're tarnishing Nike's reputation, right? So that is how tarnishment comes into play and it leads to dilution of a trademark. Similarly, you can read this example and then understand the concept in detail. One more important thing is that it requires likelihood of confusion, which means that there has to be a confusion between the products. Now, when the example I gave you was more of a general nature, but when you're talking about trademark infringement through dilution, it means that there are two companies and two companies are, presenting the same kind of products. There is so much either tarnishment or there is blurring that the consumers are actually confused between the two products. There is no clarity between the two companies. They either think they are the same or it's an extension of the old company. So that is how this works. In trademark, there's always an element of confusion. Now that we have read the passage carefully, let's move on to the question in hand. Now, please read the question, or let's read it together for a better understanding. A startup launches a beverage called Tesla Tea with a lightning bolt logo. Two things are important here: the name of the brand, that is Tesla Tea, the product rather, and the logo, which is a lightning bolt logo. Now, Tesla Incorporation files a dilution suit. Again, if you come through a dilution suit, you can understand it's a trademark infringement term, though it has no products in the food and beverage sector. Now, this has been given in order to confuse you. Look out for such, questions in your CLAT paper. You'll be able to understand where you don't have to get tricked and you have to just think logically and answer the question. Now, what is this question asking? Which factor most strongly supports Tesla's claim? Now here Tesla has filed a dilution suit and it's saying that Tesla is filing a dilution suit against Tesla Tea. And Tesla itself manufactures cars and other electronic vehicles, right? So it is not a competitor, direct competitor through the beverage industry or the food industry. Then what do you think is the most supporting argument in favor of Tesla that has brought about a suit against Tesla Tea? What do you think will support it most? This is very important. Even though you've read this passage, you've done your homework, done everything, but if you fail to read and understand this question at last, you will not be able to answer correctly. So let's look at the options. The companies operate in different industries. It is not supporting Tesla's claim. It is rather weakening it. So wrong. Think it as if you are Tesla's lawyer. What would you take as an option? The startup did not occupy Tesla's car designs. Wrong. Customers are unlikely to confuse tea with electric vehicles. Wrong. Here the correct answer is C. Tesla is a well-known mark and its use could weaken its uniqueness. Now this is an argument that if you put forward, it also syncs with what is dilution, how a trademark infringement works, and how Tesla can move forward with its dilution suit. Because Tesla is such a famous and a well-known brand that even if any product such as a Tesla Tea comes into the market, it could weaken or dilute the uniqueness of the products. Correct? Next, let's move on to the next question in hand. Now, next question. Suppose a famous company named Luminex that manufactures surgical lights discovers a local hair salon named Luminex Beauty Lounge. The salon argues that there's no similarity in goods or services. There are two, brands of the same name. One is Salon, and the other one is a famous company that manufactures surgical lights. Surgical lights. Now, there is a lot of difference between the two. But let's see if we can answer the question correctly. Is the company likely to succeed in a dilution claim? Now, a dilution claim has been brought against the salon. The famous company is bringing a dilution claim. Do you think it will hold in court? The correct answer is yes, because Luminex is a well-known brand and its distinctiveness is being blurred. This is the similar question that we could see in the previous question that we solved together. If you can solve that question in the first hand, this question should be very easy for you as well. Let's move on to our next passage. This is in regard to patent law, section 3, clause D, and evergreening. You'll read about the concepts in detail in this passage, but before that, I urge you to pause the video for a minute and try to recall what patent law is about and what all I have taught you in our previous class, so that you can, with a clear and open mind and with a lot of clarity of concept, you can go ahead with answering the questions. In this, section of IPR, which is patent law, we had also learnt about what is therapeutic efficacy, Novartis versus Union of India. We had learned about a lot of things that are already mentioned here. Industrial application, right? So this must not be very hard for you to follow, but let's move on with the question and answers. Okay, now let's read the question. Pharma Corp files a patent for a new salt form of an existing antibiotic. It is a patent for a new salt form. So the salt form is new, but it's of an existing antibiotic, right? They claim it dissolves faster and it has fewer side effects, but present no clinical data on improved treatment outcomes. Now, when we're talking about improved treatment outcomes, what do you think it's talking about? It's talking about, yes, you're correct, therapeutic efficacy, right? Now, it's not important that they'll always mention this exact term, so it's easy for you to answer. Sometimes it might be a little twisted. In that case, you have to apply your minds, and then you have to come to a conclusion. So here, treatment outcomes will result in therapeutic efficacy. So keeping this in mind, what is the most likely legal outcome under Section 3 Clause T? If you need some more reference, you can go back to the passage. You can read what Section 3 Clause T means, and then you can come back to the question and solve it. For now, the answer will be option B. Patent will be denied due to lack of proven enhanced therapeutic efficacy. Right? It was there in the question itself. Here, if you want to go through an elimination method, we can do that as well. Now, patent will be granted is something that conceptually it will be wrong. So you can rule out all these three, right? If there is one more option where patent will be denied, it's just patent will be denied. If only here, full stop. Till this, if it was given, then also you should have chosen option B. Why? Because here an explanation is given and it's a very concrete explanation to the point while not keeping you in the dark and referencing the paragraph as well, right? So this is the answer. So with this, we have come to the conclusion of our question and answer round, and I hope you have gotten a good gist of how the questions will appear before you in the CLAT examination. Now the difficulty level will be higher or lesser depending on the question being set, but that doesn't mean you will not apply all the tips I have given you, which is to read the passage carefully, to go through the main question after reading the passage at least twice, so that you do not fail to understand what it is asking of you, and lastly, to refer to the passage in case of any doubt. Do not lose out on a mark and get a negative mark at the same time while answering easy questions, and now I'm sure you will be able to ace your intellectual property right questions. That is all. Thank you.